Hey guys, this is Joe Whitcomb with another episode of Reboot Your Relationship, and I hope everyone is doing well out there. And it's been a ride for everybody going through the pandemic, quarantine, and lockdown. I think this is probably the first time ever in history where an entire world and people are experiencing the same thing at exactly the same time. So I can imagine all of us can be feeling a heightened sense of arousal or stress, anxiety, depression even. And, just to make the case here for everyone, we're not alone. And if you are feeling isolated or triggered a lot around this, or finding yourself even isolating more so and alienating while not really staying connected to other people, this may come up as leaving us all much more vulnerable and sensitive than ever before, because we're all experiencing the same stressors right now. So our show today, we're going to talk about this stuff, and I hope this is going to be helpful for all of us when we talk about getting into understanding our triggers. I've been talking about triggers for a bit, but what does even a trigger mean, or what does it mean to even get triggered, right? Because why do we hold this trauma in our bodies? There's a good book out there if you ever read it. It's The Body Keeps Score, and another one by Dr. Peter Levine called Naming the Tiger. And this is really, and I've integrated a lot of this stuff back into the trauma-informed relationship psychotherapy methods that we've been talking through all the podcasts here. But this is going to be really important because right now I think collectively, we are all experiencing this stuff, and it is probably one of the most important times in our life to really begin to reevaluate our lifestyles, our values, our personality, our choices, everything that we've gone through. And as you've kind of looked through our own collective history and past, we've really have become more disconnected and isolated. But right now, we're going to be a lot more vulnerable to a lot of that stress triggering us and leaving us feeling even worse in some ways, because this can sometimes feel like it's going to be a permanent state or a perpetual problem or something. It's a never ending, or just one more thing into the heap of pain that we can go through if we're not working. So today I want to really be fully present with you and share with you that we are going through something that has never prepared us for anything like this in the world. And it makes sense if you're feeling confused. It makes sense if you're feeling that sense of bewilderment and uncertainty in the world right now. And our minds and our nervous system are scanning our environment every day, looking for higher ground, looking for something that's stable, to orientate ourselves to something that we have never had to experience before in our lives, right? And for some of you out there listening, this might be just another day. It might be, you're just spending time in the house or whatever. But there are people out here I know that know people with coronavirus or have died from coronavirus and the COVID-19, to be more specific. But this is a time for us to collectively begin to find ways to heal. And because we are wounded here in relationship, and the only way to heal is through the context of relationship. And if you're in a relationship, learning how can you and your partner help each other heal right now, either the traumas of the past or the inevitable traumas that we cause each other, that mutual injury, that pain, the hurt for hurt, the pain for pain, that pain cycle that we can all get into. So today's episode, as we get into this today, getting back on track here, you're going to not only learn how your body holds trauma and these triggers. Again, the body keeping score, the memory, the muscle memory, all that goes on. But we're also going to get some guidance here on how you can, in the moment, come back, reel yourself back into balance, pull yourself back into your inner self, and actually allow yourself to fully move through whatever is stored in your body. And we'll talk about that a little bit some more as well. And we are going to be actually be doing some upcoming webinars and podcasts on this, so everybody can get take the time that you have to really invest in your relationships within yourself, our me, and our we. So this is going to be important to begin. We talk about how we can help really each other in relationship or in community, in a family, and we're going to chat a bit about this and how to apply this to our lives. And in my relationships, I kind of look at all of them as a living laboratory. They can be kitchen tested, or they can be playground tested. They can be out there hiking tested. They can be in the living room tested, dining room tested, bedroom tested, boardroom tested. But so this is the practice of what we're going to begin to explore over the next several weeks here as we begin to dive into it. So the first thing that we want to, and I want to begin to, and you can go back to some of the other previous podcasts and where we talk about this in conversation, how the past lives in us. We're born in relationship for relationship, love, connection, the sense of belonging. We learned these relationships through relationships, what was modeled for us, our family of origin, all that stuff. Children live what they learn and learn what they live, and then we are wounded in the context of the relationship, the family. And this is the part where the past, the trauma, abandonment, all this stuff, can be living and reenacted here in the present. So as the past lives in us, our past lives in us in ways we are maybe often unaware. And times when we may have been left alone, or yelled at, or hurt, or neglected, or abused, or misunderstood, or exposed to difficulty, or otherwise traumatized. And all this leaves imprints in our attachment systems, our operating systems, our bodies that can last through many years and decades. And the question is not whether these memories exist in us, because we know they do, but how do these memories live in us? And that's an important question, because when we begin to understand, and a lot of us try to outthink it, we try to outsmart it, we try to meditate, manage our emotions, but all this stuff that's brewing internally in our bodies is also a big part of that. So we're going to talk about this memory, and again, the memory cells and how our memory is stored in us in different ways, right? So if you're, let's say, there's the implicit and there's an explicit memory. Explicit memories, these are the ones that you may normally think about as things to remember, things that are the thoughts and memories we are fully conscious of, like the list at the grocery store, or the one that you forgot that you left back home, directions. Really, does this have any emotional content, right? Unless, of course, like I just said, you get lost, or grocery store, but that's not having to do anything with the explicit memories. But those are the things that we are able to write down and remember. And then we also have the episodic memories that we have as children, and that we begin to learn. And these are also more explicit memories. However, they have a deeper quality to them. And this is when, for example, let's say you're sitting at the ocean, right? I love the ocean, the high tides, the low tides, rip tides, the ocean, sunsets, and all of a sudden you have images from your childhood representative of, let's say, parts of our lives. These fractals or fragments, kind of like kind of like a mosaic, all these different parts and images that represent the part of our lives, right? And then we have more of these implicit memories, and these are even deeper. These are emotional memory, and that is when all of a sudden you find yourself angry, right? So if you get triggered and all of a sudden you're angry, you're frightened, wonder what just happened. There's that. How did I just get into that tunnel vision and in that amygdala hijacking, and then maybe you're feeling threatened and defensive, and then a fight might occur from this, but something in your implicit memory, deeper emotional memory, that can trigger us. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through that. But the other part of that is like procedural or body memories. And these are even deeper than some of the emotional memories or are procedural in our body memories. So let's say when we felt terrified, our bodies experience this terror physically. Shoulders to our ears, we get a knot in our belly, our heart goes fast, and I have that big red hot lava ball that's churning in there, that dragon breathing fire. And all of that, these are all the autonomic and automatic responses, right? And we all have them. And even if we understand why we're being triggered and why those emotions occur as a result, our procedural memories prime the pump that causes us to react in often inappropriate ways. Another study talks about the vagus nerve that goes from the brain down into all the organs and through all the connectors down there that sends a message from the brain to the body, right? But this is not just a unidirection, like a one-directional way of that impulse going up and down your body. It's a bidirectional impulse. And researchers now showing that 80% of that is actually coming from the body to the brain. So, wow, we are a little bit at a disadvantage with that, because if we're feeling all that in our body and it's coming from all these different locations, these triggers then become really a echo of memories stored in our bodies, and it just keeps pinging through and going faster and faster and faster sometimes so now the nervous system is kind of haywire, if you will. It's kind of in this negative feedback loop, and it's nowhere to find. It's not able to get grounded again in those moments. But we get into and a lot of times we don't really, we kind of recognize the positive side of these procedural memories. And like, for instance, learning how to ride a bike, right? That's kind of a body memory, right? Your body learns to balance, to stay, at first you're kind of wobbly, you got to be held up, you got to have training wheels as your body begins to memorize how to balance. And then we take the training wheels off, and now your mom or dad is running behind you, trying to keep you up, and then you gain some speed, you get some balance, and now your body cues in to the signal and what the body's feeling. We don't know how that happens. It's just the body's, again, a body keeps score, and now it's part of our memory, right? You know that saying, it's like riding a bike. You probably haven't ridden since you're 10, and now you're like 40, and jump on a bike, and it's like you never forgot. And so those are the types of things to think about as how does that, so that's how it can work in our body in a positive way. But as you think about the trauma, or you get the abuse, let's say you're in the woods and there's a bear, right? You see the bear and your nervous system goes in that fight, flight, freeze, right? To fight the bear, or defend yourself in some way, or you run away. Hopefully you're faster than a bear, or you freeze. You just kind of play dead, right? Now, that memory and how to do that is adaptive. That's how our body should be responding, right? When you're in a woods and there's a bear, right? That should be because if we didn't do any of those things, right, we just stood and maybe just froze, which happens a lot in when we're dealing with trauma, we kind of freeze or disassociate or detach from our reality and experiences in that moment. But here's the thing with that: if you, let's say you're at home and the bear lives in the house. Okay, now your body's picking up, okay, this emotional contagion all the time, internalizing it. Your body's memorizing it. So you see angry face, you see dad, you see whomever's walking the house where you feel a loss of security or safety or protection, and you're just waiting. And your body stays in this hyper vigilant, the heart's beating fast. When's it going to be safe? When are we going to find safety, right? So that's going on. So these triggers, okay, these are echoes again, and we have to test for echo. And testing for echo of these memories stored in our bodies, which is another way of kind of just saying for us to do the reality testing, but checking in with our body first, because our body, okay, testing for echoes is check in, what are those triggers and where do they come from, right? What's leaving me vulnerable and sensitive? And we're going to be doing a lot of talk about this on how to work through trauma, how to work through the triggers, how to go through this, and to understand what's occurring in your body when you do get, you kind of snap into that, hypervigilant mode, or disassociating or isolating or getting angry or defensive, all those types of things that black and white thinking, very rigid, tight in the body, inflexible, relentless, all those things that we do that's operating out of that wound, right? And so, for instance, when there's mutual injury, let's say, if in a couple, and I work a lot with couples with trauma, PTSD, military veterans, first responders, adult survivors of aversive childhood experiences or trauma, abuse, and all that stuff. Because in the relationship, now we get into this co-regulation or this mutual injury or some sort of a, there's a double bind in there, and also these emotional contagion that you're kind of picking up these cues, right? That whatever they're laying down or putting out, you're kind of picking up. So both people, so if there's a couple that I work with where both people have been traumatized in life, it can happen that the fear and their anger will escalate, and you get into this extremely, like ricocheting off each other, this mutual injury, which is happening here. And what is happening here is that our brains are wired to perceive threat, and all that, all the intense emotions ensuing basically is caused by something real, right? Or sometimes even perceived. But our partner may do something or not do something, or even give a look or say something, and all of a sudden your body reacts, your jaw clenches, you develop a knot in your stomach, a tightening in the shoulders, a faster heartbeat. Our brains look to find causation, looking for evidence for this, this very symptomatic response, and we're trying to often find what to attach blame to, or anyone or causation to, by anybody that's nearby. And so that part, slowing that part down and working with that with a couple, because a lot of times we try to go fast through these things, but the body, to be able to catch up with, slower is faster, right? The slower is a faster way of getting and connecting to it, because our brain's going to look for, okay, something happened, there's a trigger, there's a trigger. Now the story about what just occurred, we're interpreting, translating that, adding, subtracting meaning, and looking for evidence. And now that vicious cycle we just talked about, that escalation, ricocheting off each other, and now it's really hard to slow all that down when that's happening. Almost, it's automatic. It's almost like a trigger, like it's triggered because it's just something happens, and boom, bam, you guys are off. So in this way, we enter in these situations where we begin to believing, as we go through life as a little child, learning to survive, that black and white, all or nothing, that we believe this must be all be about me, right? when in reality it's often just about the result of an echo or echoing of early memories stored in our body, kind of reminding us somehow about that trauma and what was there to keep you safe and secure and protected you as a child is now kind of a velvet cage, keeping us trapped in our bodies. So a relationship and this interaction, this dance, this will go nowhere when people are stuck in this this type of velocity trap of blaming and shaming, and the shaming and the complain and defend, all that stuff with, the roddy. You get into that vicious cycle. All that's occurring, right? Because one of my biases, when I believe, is, there are multiple dimensions co-occurring simultaneously that not one dimension can explain the conflict. And is it something else? So again, going back to this wood story, right? Let's say the woods. You're walking through the woods now and you see a brown squiggly thing. Maybe in your forest, your woods growing up, brown squiggly things, you go pick it up and you grab it and it's a stick, right? It's safe, it's useful, you can use it to protect yourself, it's got a utility to it, it's functional, or you can use it to hike. Okay, so brown squiggly things, okay, you decode, brown squiggly things, sticks. So let's say in your partner's forest, they're walking through, they see the same brown squiggly thing, and they grab it, and it bites them. Now, the brain, the nervous system, that fight, flight, all that stuff, the body, the somatic experience, the body experiences is now saying danger, danger, danger. So now we're decoding all brown squiggly things as dangerous snakes, right? To you, from your perception of brown squiggly things, you decode in your body, in your brain, in your nervous system, and in this fight, flight reactions response as something dangerous. It's a snake. Run away, right? Right? Or kill it or whatever. Or maybe you froze. Maybe you just couldn't move. You were so scared. Maybe it's a time that you were walking and whoever was the dangerous one walking in the house, right? And your heart starts pounding because you see brown squiggly thing. Now, if you don't have that experience, say someone else sitting in a house and that same thing occurs, they're not having the same reaction as you are. They might be picking up some cues from you, but ultimately, and they're going, hey, what's going on? Something just happened, right? What just happened? So the somatic experiencing this body, by going through this as a couple, right? When I work with mutually traumatized couples or the mutual trauma with couples and with people, especially going through all this right now, we're super vulnerable to all this stuff. But this connecting back to ourselves, right? We're so disconnected. I think a lot of us realize now that we're isolating and in kind of in a quarantine lockdown, just how disconnected we are and what we use to numb ourselves out emotionally and relationally. And now we're having to face some of this stuff. And maybe for a lot of you, this is a really good opportunity. You're spending more time connecting, creating memories and rituals and having fun. And for some of us out there who maybe are living alone, this is not a heaven, it is a hell loop. And I'm sure this is really weighing down on your body and bring up all sorts of feelings. And maybe it's abandonment or being alone, or, is it always going to be like this? And these sensations in our bodies, and to notice all that goes on without having to react. So imagine if you're in a relationship, that all these sensations, emotions, that you're able to notice it all. Notice what you're noticing in your body. We do a lot of talk about the brain. We talk a lot about the emotions. We talk a lot about our feelings and emotions. But right now, we can talk about all that later. But this is a holistic approach with the trauma-informed relationship psychotherapy. We're not just talking about the story. We're talking about what's the narrative or what's the sensations going on in your body as well. Because when we do this, guys, it helps us and helps you go from being closed and love avoidant, shut down, maybe, and defensive, or rigid, tight, to being more nuanced, flexible, open, and curious. The wonderment, right? Which is really the key to trauma recovery, in relationships. Again, that we're broken relationship and we're healed in this context of the relationship. And this is one of the ways that we work with couples. Again, working with Marines in the military, I always say, hey, how does one take an island? When we go to war, when they were going to war, how does one, take on that island? Well, you can't just take it by land. You got to go air, land, and sea, right? And those three ways. And so you have to have the air, the ground, and you can't just go take the entire island at once. You take the beach, right? And then you have to, move through that until we are able to take on that whole thing. And that's the same thing like in anything, right? If you're rebuilding a house or reconstructing anything, we sometimes got to, start slow and come at it from all different angles so that you can really understand the mosaic of the relationship and how those parts and pieces interact, right? And that's where we're going to go into it, because our relationships, again, are a constant source for healing. Again, it's that living laboratory, that art, that kind of love academy where living, loving, and being in constant interaction with our significant others provides just really a rich resource and endless opportunities for our triggers to be revealed if we can look at whatever's showing up on the path in practice as you're walking down that road, and whatever shows up in front of you is the perfect blessing. It's the perfect gift for us to grow, for our own evolution, for our own way. And instead of being the caretakers for one another's wounded child in those moments, when that you can really kind of play with the resistance and play with the relationship, and that it's kind of being more playmates for each other's healthy child, and working a lot with faith-based and even with Christians, Jesus said we got to be like children, be like children, because when you look at a child, you see the innocence and not the guilt. And here is the miracle. It's that shift in perception that you begin to see your person, your partner, your best friend, your lover. You see that little girl, that little boy, and see their innocence and not the guilt. Because while this can seem, and really for a lot of us it be seen as very painful and burdensome and even sometimes unsexy, to talk about this stuff, right? Bringing the shadows and dragging the shadows and dark parts, kicking and screaming to the light, right? That can bring up a lot of shame. And shame is a belief, possibly, a lot of us learned as children that the belief that we can't change, that nothing I do or say is going to change anything anyway, so why bother, right? So there's that heaviness, right? But this triggers, these are opportunities for us to heal. It's the perfect gift. And a lot of us, it's kind of like the oyster, right? With the irritant, the sand under, in it that transforms into the pearl. Well, triggers and irritations like this are the irritant to our transformation, our healing, our recovery, or whatever. But because we haven't really developed a kind of a philosophy or belief, or even our bodies, when that irritant gets in there, what do? We just spit it out. We spit it out. It doesn't get to form. So being able to sit with our relationships and be with our partners and sit in the crucible and that's joining in the truth, right? And I think the unforced rhythm of grace goes a long ways too, for our intimate relationships as the ideal place to offer and this is where our traumas arise. Because we can face our memories and these reactions and responses and body reactions, behavioral tendencies, with a trusted other who can share it with us, hold us, and be with us, and to begin to hit the circuit breaker on the mutual injury and that trauma cycle that we get into, trauma bonds, and be able to come into a greater aliveness and joy and curiosity and wonderment, because we cannot live our life with vitality and clarity when we're stuck in our habitual trauma responses, these trauma loops, the trauma bonds that keep us frozen in